Hi, I'm Olivia, and this is AV Club and the 25 books that I would like to read in 2025. Like a lot of people, I think one of my resolutions is always to read more books that I already own, and things that are on my physical TBR is a big thing for me. I massively culled my physical books whenever I moved to Australia, and was able to make decisions about, I haven't read this and I've had it for so long, and so maybe it's just time to pass on. But since that time, since moving here in the past year, I've gotten a lot of more books. I did bring books with me that I have been meaning to read for years. And so these are 25 physical books on my TBR that I would really like to get to. If I don't get to them, it's whatever. But there is a theme among these books that a lot of them are ones that have been given to me. And that's something that I would like to rectify, is if someone has given me a book and chosen it for me, then it is something that I would like to get to. First book in that vein is The Mothers by Bennett. This was given to me by Shannon Wolfe, who is a poet, and I met her when I was living in Louisiana, and she no longer lives in Louisiana either. Our times there were both brief but overlapping in a way that was beautiful, and she has a poetry collection out called Green Card Girl if you want to check it out. But she gave this to me my birthday whenever we were all in lockdown during COVID, because it was in July, and so I saw no one that day, and she just left this wrapped on my doorstep, and it was such a very kind thing to do. I was definitely already interested in this book, but it was whenever The Vanishing Half was very, very popular, and it's always one of those things where if something is very popular at the time, then I always wait. And so I think that this is the year that I can read The Mothers, which is about a 17-year-old girl who has just lost her mother, and about community and friendship and love, living up to expectations. It just sounds like a really good literary fiction, and something that I will like whenever I do get to it. A book that I picked up in Brooklyn last year was Hit Parade of Tears by Izumi. Oh my gosh, I said last year, but in 2023, so almost 2 years ago now. Time is flying. Anyway, Hit Parade of Tears, stories by Izumi Suzuki. I do have one of her novels also on hold at the library, because I'm very interested into getting to her writing this year. She died by suicide whenever she was in her 30s, and is being talked about as a countercultural icon, an icon of science fiction. So those are all things that really appeal to me, a literary science fiction, dark writing, and this is just the most beautiful book. Story collections always take me a little bit longer to get to and a little bit longer to get through, but I do think that it's something that I can, if I put my mind to it, I can get to this year. A book that I'd like to get to this year in order to be reading more Australian fiction, and especially Australian genre fiction. I feel like I'm pretty good at picking up the current literary fiction things that are going around in Australia, but it's kind of hard to find horror specific to Australia. But the Pilo Family Circus by Will Elliott is one that's very widely picked up. It was an ABC Fiction Award winner, and the ABC here is I guess more akin to the BBC in Britain more than the ABC of America, where it is kind of an institution. And yeah, this is a horror book about clowns that's been picked up and talked about in such a way. But yeah, if you have any resources for finding Australian horror fiction, in my Google searches, I haven't been able to find anything that really documents Australian horror novels. Australian horror film is a big industry and is well loved, but the novels I find harder to come across, and so that's something that I would like to figure out, because I'm sure there are people here writing horror fiction, and it's just not as advertised. Another book that's been on my on my physical TBR forever was Out by Natsuo Kirino, which is about this group of women who I believe commit a murder, like kind of like a revenge murder. I started it once upon a time, and it is about at least a group of women who work in a factory together. Yes. One of the women kills her abusive husband and then seeks the help of her coworkers to cover it up. So it's just such a beloved book, and I just didn't really, I don't think that it was like a thriller enough whenever I first picked it up, and that's what I was in the mood for. But I think going back into it and kind of taking it more as like a kind of group drama, I think will be a more successful way for me to finish it this time. The 7 Moons of Maali Almeida is one that I found in a op shop here last year, and it is described as a mashup of Stranger Things and Salman Rushdie, but I think that that's just reading the actual blurb makes me think that that's more of like a trying to sell this book to everyone kind of thing. But it does appear to be about a man in the afterlife trying to contact the man and woman he loves the most, and somehow it seems very speculative and queer and political. It sounds really interesting, and also won the Booker Prize in 2022. Sayaka Murata, Life Ceremony. I bought this book for my birthday last year whenever I was in Sydney. I got it from Kinokuniya, and is just one that I need to get to this year because I loved Convenience Store Woman and I loved Earthlings, so I'm sure I will love this as well. But it is a story collection, like I said before. It just takes me a little bit longer to get to story collections, but the starting and stopping all the time is something that I will be working on. And like that, another story collection, Brian Evenson's Song for the Unraveling of the World. Brian Evenson, by all that I'm hearing, seems to be an author that I would really love. This book was actually sent to me by Alicia, who used to be on BookTube and kind of hinted in her New Year's post on Instagram that she might be coming back to BookTube. So I will be keeping my eyes peeled for that, because she was just one of my absolute favorite booktubers whenever she was going on, and she sent it to me as part of I won a giveaway whenever she hit a certain amount of subscribers. So I'm just bad about story collections, and I usually, like, whenever I get through them, I love them. I'm sorry. Fingersmith by Sarah Waters is one that I've started before and just didn't get around to finishing, even though I was loving everything I was reading so far. I'm going to be better at reading big books, and by completing Name of the Rose last year, I proved to myself that I can complete a big book. This, I feel like, is more of like a cold weather book, so I'm going to be looking to read this towards autumn and winter of this year. And I think I'm better doing that now, because usually before I moved, the cold weather reads were overlapping with like wanting to read kind of like easy to read stuff around Christmas. But now that my winter and Christmas are separated, I think that I can really get to some of like the more intense and bleaker wintry reads more consistently during the time of year that I want to. Another book that was given to me and I started and have never finished is Middlesex, which was given to me by my friend Kurt, and a multi-generational story. It's just like one of those things that like so many people really love, and I've never finished a book by him ever, I don't believe, even though I've also started and read a good bit of The Virgin Suicides before, and I had to return it to the library, and it's just, these are like my books of shame. And so by coming on here and talking about them, I really feel like, you know, I can let go of the shame and just pick them back up and read them, and it's not going to be that big of a deal. Stan Grant's Talking to My Country is another one I'd like to get to. Stan Grant is a Wiradjuri author in Australia, and this is a meditation on race, identity, and history. He acknowledges James Baldwin in the acknowledgements, so I believe that it will be kind of along that literary meditation vibe. But this will be the first thing that I have read by him, so I'm not exactly sure yet. This is another one of my shame books that I've posted about. I think it's like my Shorty September or Nonfiction November is whenever I've brought this book up multiple times and I've never finished it. Incarcerated Mothers. I've read like the first few essays multiple times, and it's really interesting about incarcerated women all over the world, but mostly in the Canadian context. And where I lived in Louisiana is like one of the most incarcerated places in the world, and just recently the Northern Territory here in Australia is now even more, like a higher rate of incarceration than that. I think that thinking about the people who are in prison, the context in which places are becoming so highly incarcerated and how that deals with race and socioeconomic status. Mothers are already excluded from society in a lot of ways, and adding on to that, just wanted to say hey, huh? Mothers are already excluded from society in a lot of ways, and incarcerated women even more so on top of that. I do think this will be a valuable book for having those perspectives gathered. Young Mungo by Douglas Stuart. I have an autographed copy. Where did I pick up this autographed copy? Somewhere on a trip. It was picked up from Skylark in Columbia, Missouri. This is another one of those books that I didn't read right away. First of all, because I was on a trip. Second of all, it feels like something that you have to come into with the right attitude for picking up a pretty serious literary fiction. And also it was just like so popular. One of those things where I just put off popular books for a while. In my quest to learn more about mushrooms, I'd like to read Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrake. I believe I picked this one up from a really cool bookstore in Bellingen, New South Wales, which is kind of like, it's really interesting. It's kind of like a hippie kind of vibe town, and that's not really something that you get very frequently in Australia for whatever reason. Like most cities that I've been to have been pretty much the same culturally, and so to have something that kind of has a different sort of vibe going on, especially in like a smaller kind of inland town, was really cool. But it was a great bookstore there, but always ready to learn more about the natural world. Last Days by Adam Nevill, another book that I've picked up and put down. It's gonna get read this year because I was really enjoying it, and it was spooky. A horror about a cult and a documentarian, and getting involved in documenting weird goings on with the cult, and that's exactly my kind of vibe. Truly exactly my kind of vibe. The Gilda Stories by Jewelle Gomez is one that was sent to me by my friend Juan Valencia, and was one that I'd actually started before and never finished, like is the theme with most of these books in the stack. But this is a queer vampire story from 1991, so ahead of its time in telling those kinds of stories. Poppy Zebride, Exquisite Corpse. This is like the most offensive cover that I can think of, and for that reason I kind of am into it. Like I love the Confessions of a Shopaholic vibe for Exquisite Corpse. But this is about, I think, 2 serial killers that fall in love. That might not be quite exactly right, but it's also set in New Orleans, and I would like to read some books from Louisiana still. Kind of missing it. This is one that I should get to so soon. The Ruins by Scott Smith, because whenever I got this, I said, I'm going to wait until it's hot and then I'm going to read it. And now it's been hot, but I forgot that I had a book that I was planning on waiting till it was hot to read. But this is a book about something horrific going on in some Mayan ruins in the middle of the jungle. It seems like it's going to be very inspired by the jungle itself, like the weird vines and flowers and all of the natural world. So it feels like a very hot weather book to me. Limberlost by Robbie Arnott is making the list because I loved Flames by Robbie Arnott, and I'd also read like a short story that he had written right after I read Flames. Yeah, I also read The Rain Herein, and so this was the next book that was released, and I think I don't know if his newest book has just been released or is about to be released, but I do need to catch up on this one too, because he's an author that I will read everything by. Just incredible Australian author. I don't even know what this one's about, honestly. An extraordinary chronicle of life and land, of carnage and kindness, blood ties and love. That's what I would have guessed. He's very good in writing about the land and the natural world. So I do think that I will get on with that one as well. The End of Policing is one that, like many other people, picked up in 2020 and just have never gotten around to reading, even though I think it's just as valuable to read as ever. I would like to get to more nonfiction this year. Whenever I read nonfiction, I'm always wanting to take notes at the same time, so it's just one of those things that slows me down a little bit. But we will get there. One of my tried and true picks for any kind of TBR adjacent thing is pulling into Philip K. Dick, and Valis is one that's like one of his most popular ones that I haven't read. Like, I've read pretty much all the big ones that you can think of except for the Valis trilogy. So that's one that I would like to correct this year. I have plenty of his books to read still, but maybe correcting one of the most popular ones is the next way to go. Perfume by Patrick Suskind is another kind of classic that I haven't read yet, and I got this I really like this copy that I got here this year. Well, I'm just seeing that there was an annotation Xmas 2003. Can you imagine getting this book for Christmas? Like, what a beautiful gift. But I love a twisted erotic book, and I think that's what people get out of this one. And it's like one that I'm really excited to read. So whenever I'm picking my next book up, I wonder why that isn't one that I've already grabbed yet, because it does seem very up my alley. Another shame one, House of Leaves, which I've gotten a lot of way through multiple times. And I just read We Used to Live Here by Marcus Kluwer this year, and I feel like that's in some ways kind of in the lineage of House of Leaves, and so I really need to read this to fully appreciate everything that's coming after it that's influenced by this. So House of Leaves is one that I'm hoping to get to this year. And then for my final 3 books, this is something that's so ambitious, but whenever you have to make a list of 25 books that you may or may not read this year, you can go ahead and be ambitious, because, you know, no one's holding me to it. And wouldn't it be nice if I read the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy this year? I read The Hobbit whenever I saw the first, the Fellowship of the Ring came out whenever I was in elementary school, I think, and I read The Hobbit at that time, but I've never read The Lord of the Rings. And they have everything that I would like, because they're very linguistics influenced. You can tell when I got these because of the movie tie-in covers that I believe might all be from the Fellowship of the Ring, or maybe from the Two Towers. You can also tell because my bookmark that's from elementary school is still in here, and you can tell it was a different time. It was a different time for little Olivia. So wouldn't it be great if I read these this year? I know that they're not for everyone, but I do think that they would be for me if I could just sit down and read them. So those are 25 books that I would love to read this year. I do think that I'm making more progress on my physical TBR because like I'd really gotten into reading just like audiobooks and on my e-reader, but I've started taking an evening walk every day with my physical book and just walking around in a square in my neighborhood and reading the physical book. And I think that's a way that I can do it because I just like, it doesn't feel as comfortable to read physically to me anymore whenever I'm sitting down. But I think now that I'm on this new walking and reading journey, I don't really want to read this Lord of the Rings walking, I don't think. But otherwise, I think that we've got something good going here. So I would love to know your thoughts on any of these books, if there's any that you think I should prioritize, and what you think that you will be reading this year. If you have plans, if you have any TBRs, tell me so I can go check them out. But I will talk to you again soon. Bye!